right, shalom, family, shalom. Welcome back. Erev Tov to everyone that's tuning in today. And as you can tell by the title, we're going to be getting into some open readings today, dealing with Phoenicians and Israelites, basically dealing with North Africa, things of that sort. What we're going to do today is read through a couple sources. We're going to read a few chapters from one book, and hopefully, if it's enough time, once I wrap that up, we're going to get into who or what population that we see today that could connect to the Phoenicians. And after that, if we have time as well, after that, we will bring out the genetic data of the Phoenicians. All right, dealing with Y chromosomes and things like that from different Phoenician cities and locations. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull my screen up. We're going to get into this reading today because, again, this just is open reading, getting some information, learning about the Phoenicians and Israelites of North Africa and other localities where they were. So give me 1 second while I pull my screen up, and then we're going to get into this reading. All right. So we're going to be reading from this book here, Between the East and West, A History of North African Jews. Between East and West, A History of North African Jews, and it's by Andre Kouakri. I don't want to butcher that name, but there it is. 1 second, let me make this screen full for everyone. And shalom to everyone that's tuning in again. Shalom to everyone that's tuning in again. Greetings. Again, this is the name of the book we'll be reading from, Between East and West, A History of North African Jews. All right, so we'll be reading from a little bit from chapter 1 and chapter 2, and then we'll transition over to another source. Again, if you want this full book, feel free to email me, and I email it over to you. I'm going to skip through the intro. We're going to start at chapter 1 just to speed things up. Again, we're dealing with the Phoenicians and Israelites of North Africa. All right. So, let me zoom in a little bit. So, the origins of the Jewish and Berber populations. The origin of the Jews of North Africa stretches back to the earliest history of that region. While it is probable that members of the Israelite tribes were among the earliest Phoenician traders who colonized the African coast and founded Carthage, this must remain speculation in the absence of more conclusive historical proof. And if we know anything about the Phoenicians, we know the Phoenicians sprang from Lebanon or Tyre and Sidon. And those specific localities will also be territories of Zebulun and Asher. So if Israelites did follow the Phoenicians into Carthage or North Africa, we would expect, tribes of Zebulun and Asher to be amongst them. It says of some Jewish significance to the later history of the North African Jewish and Berber populations are the conclusions which can be drawn from the frequently recurring legend that ascribes a Palestinian origin to the indigenous Berbers. The Byzantine historian Proclus, for instance, states that the Phoenicians, fleeing before Joshua, left their Palestinian homeland and migrated across Egypt, spreading out as far as the Pillars of Hercules. And another thing we could mention or take reference from is in the scripture as well. When Joshua was doing the conquest, he actually did not drive out all the inhabitants of Tyre and Sidon. He actually drove them into Sidon, actually, according to the book of Joshua, which will be where a lot of Phoenicians came from. But we're going to continue to read. It says, in support of this view, Proclus pointed out that in his day, the natives of North Africa spoke Punic, a language closely akin to Hebrew. He also mentioned a Punic inscription on 2 stone columns at Tigis, which he claimed read, "It is we who have taken flight before that bandit, Joshua, son of Nun." So it's possible that some of the Berber tribes in North Africa descend from those Canaanite, or rather Semitic Canaanite tribes that were in the land of Canaan. It is generally agreed that the extraordinary persistence of this legend derives from the profoundly Semitic character of North Africa during the nearly 7th century of Carthaginian domination. In the 1st century CE, Christian and Jewish polemists added to the existing legend that the idea that the Berbers were of Canaanite origin, a theory which was taken up by Muslim writers with equal enthusiasm. Ibn Khaldun, the indigenous Muslim historian, wrote, "The Berbers are descendants of Canaan, son of Ham, son of Noah," which I disagree with. I do agree that they are Canaanites, but not descendants of Ham. It says, they received their Judaism from the powerful neighbors of the Israelites of Syria. It would thus seem that the legend of Berber's Canaanite origin was already widespread at this time of the compilation of the Book of Jubilees, probably in the 1st century BCE. The Book of Jubilees spoke of Ham as dividing Africa amongst his descendants. Josephus, however, went further, ascribing the Berbers a Semitic origin and tracing their descent from Midian, a son of Abraham, and his second wife, Keturah. Rabbinic literature frequently repeated the legend, further reinforcing the connection between the Berbers and the biblical Israelites. A Talmud text, which a Tophetera of the 2nd century CE considered old, spoke of a migration to Africa of Girgashites, one of the 7 nations dwelling in Canaan at the time of Joshua. The Girgashites departed voluntarily from Palestine at the request of Joshua, and from this reason, they were given a fine land for the patrimony, Africa. In the Middle Ages, the legend preserved in Jewish writings was further enriched, and descendants of Esau were added to the Canaanite beggars of North Africa. All right, so it's also possible that some of the tribes within North Africa would be descendants of Esau, because again, Berbers are nothing but populations that migrated from the Levant, from Palestine. So it's possible that they could be those Moabite tribes, those Edomite tribes, things like that, those Midianite tribes, those Ben-Ami tribes. So it's possible that these Berbers can be a amalgamation of those Semitic tribes that would make up a part of the Phoenician peoples. Because again, we do have some Berber tribes that claim to be descendants of Moab. So it's highly likely that other Berber tribes are descendants from these other Semitic Canaanite tribes as well, from the land of Canaan. And it says, according to Josephon, a descendant of Esau in flight from Egypt, founded a people in Carthage. So that's real significant. Among early Christian writers or writings, a text by St. Augustine is particularly revealing. If you ask your countrymen what they are, they will reply Kenani. And that's actually a derivation of the Hebrew word Kanani or Canaan. It is their corruption pathos or pathos. One letters has been changed. It is to be understood as Kanani. This ancient tradition in its various forms is highly important, for it makes the Berbers cousins of the Jews by race and by language, as will be shown later by religion. It says it has been repeated by both Jewish, Christian, and Muslim writers and cannot be lightly dismissed. Only a few of the many texts of the subjects that have been collected and analyzed by Marcel Simon have been presented here. But the core of undisputed truth is that from the 8th century BCE, the beginning of Phoenician colonization, North Africa was subject to Semitic influences. All right. A converse of the legend of the Berbers' Canaanite origin related that the Jews had originated in North Africa and had migrated from there to Palestine. Tacitus repeated another version according to which Jews had originated in Crete and migrated to Libya, while the 3rd century Christian account of the unknown authorship extended this to include the inhabitants of the Barlica Islands. And actually, this is very true right here, this specific quotation right here where it says the Jews originated from North Africa and had migrated from there to Palestine. We know that the Israelites, or the sons, descendants of Jacob, originated in Egypt, which is North Africa, and from there they migrated to Palestine. So I do agree with that specific quotation as well. So it continues on to say the North African folklore gives considerable importance to the legend concerning Joshua, as R. Batist's monograph Nidorma Etlis Torah shows. Many Muslims are convinced to this day that Joshua worried in the Maghreb, and the Maghreb is everything west of Egypt, so specifically West Africa. And the reason they believe this is because you have a lot of tribes in North Africa, in the Maghreb, that state that they were traced into Africa or in the interiors by Joshua, son of Nun, as we saw earlier. It goes on, thus adding further substance to the legend which derives from the inscriptions reported by Proteus, except that the Berbers would now seem to have been allies of Joshua who helped to put his enemies to flight. Joshua is supposed to have died at Nebroma, near Teklemic, which his tomb is widely venerated to this day by Jews and Muslims. So it's a tradition in this location. I believe this is specifically North Africa or the Maghreb, like Morocco, somewhere around that area. I have to Google it to be sure. But it's a tradition that Joshua, son of Nun, actually died in that location in Africa. And they treat that as a burial site or tomb site to this day. It said the extent of the veneration, according to him, is an indication of the extent to which such tradition is rooted in the Maghreb. The tendency to identify local history with the biblical past can be ascribed to the Punic and Hebrew influences on the region, which will be discussed in the following passages. All right, and I'm checking out the comment section, and you are going off right now, Brother Lionform. You bringing a lot of heat in that comment section. I agree with a lot of stuff you're bringing out. I'm going to touch on it later once I get done reading this. But that's facts. You're bringing out a lot of good info in the comment section. So let's move on to the rule of Carthage. The recorded history of North Africa begins with the founding of Carthage in 813 BCE. For 667 years till its fall in 146 BCE, Carthage molded North Africa into its own Semitic image. And what's interesting about that is after it fell, Rome came into power. And we know that in 115 BCE or CE, actually, you had Jews fleeing from Carthage into sub-Saharan Africa. So that's very, very interesting. But let's continue to dig. It says, not even the efforts of the Roman conquerors in plundering up the sites of Carthage and showing it was sought were able to uproot the Oriental civilization left by the oldest and most tenacious colonizers of the Mediterranean. For over 6 centuries, a circle of towns dependent on Carthage or on Carthage exerted on the indigenous inhabitants the steady influence of the language, Punic, and one culture, the Semitic, both of Palestinian origin. All right. To quote Giselle, by the end of this period, the natives of Africa or North Africa, by their language and by their customs, became Phoenicians. And we know these peoples or these native peoples of North Africa were Berbers. It says, in other words, Semites closely related to the Hebrews of Philistine or Palestine. The widespread use of the lone survivor of the Punic language were undoubtedly at the root of the popular legend of the Berbers' Semitic origin. The oldest extant Punic inscriptions date from the 4th to 2nd centuries BCE and are all that have survived from the presumably extensive literature of which a number of texts are believed to have survived in the Middle Ages. Nothing remains today of Punic writings of philosophy, history, literature, or poetry. Our knowledge of Carthage is limited almost entirely to what has been recorded by its Roman enemies, thus leaving a regrettable gap in the knowledge of Jewish life in the Punic settlements of North Africa. A precise knowledge of the areas of Punic penetration and its rate of progress might have allowed certain conjectures and the development of the Jewish communities. But historians have been satisfied with generalize certainly or concerning this area. It goes on to say, in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE, the Semitic language was localized in the coastal colonies. During the 6th century, it began to penetrate the interior. All right, and that goes even more into sub-Saharan Africa because you do have a quote-unquote Libyan Phoenician Israelite connection in the ancient kingdom of Ghana, and you also have a Phoenician custom and linguistic connection and the Akan peoples of West Africa. But that's for a later subject we'll get to. It says all the documents available concur on the surprising spread of the language in the subsequent period among all sections of the population, the aristocracy, as well as the peasants and laboring classes. The Roman historians Spartacus recorded that Septimus Severus, the Roman emperor of the Semitic descent, who was born in Leptis Magna, retained his Punic accent throughout his life. His sister, arriving at the court of Leptis Magna, knew almost no Latin. The major source of the spread of Punic language in North Africa is St. Augustine. His writings confirm, let me highlight that. His writings confirm that the peasants were speaking Punic almost exclusively several centuries after the fall of Carthage. And again, we know that those people in Carthage during the Carthaginian period, during the Roman period, and even after the fall of Carthage, and even to this day, are Berbers. And their language is strikingly similar to the Punic language, but we're going to get into that. It says, thus leaving no doubt that the Latin culture never succeeded in supplanting the deeply rooted Phoenician civilization. Valerius, a predecessor of Augustine, mentioned by him as having questioned some peasants on the meaning of the Punic word salus, which he had overheard them use. When they explained that it meant three in Punic, as also with a variation pronunciation in Hebrew, he was overjoyed to find an additional connection between the Trinity and salvation. In his sermon, St. Augustine freely fell back on Punic to explain Hebrew or Aramaic words from the scriptures. Punic naturally began or being familiar to his audiences. So even St. Augustine were able to rely on Punic to explain certain Hebrew and Aramaic words found within the scripture, just showing you how similar in nature, Punic that the Phoenicians spoke in Hebrew and Aramaic that the Judeans and other Semitic tribes spoke was. It says, moreover, he was accompanied by an interpreter of his preaching tour or on his preaching tours in the countryside to make sure that he would be understood by the Punic-speaking peasants. St. Augustine pointed out that the circumcilians refer to their bludgeons with which they forcibly converted the masses to Christianity as Israel. Thus, the dreaded sanctuaries, dubbed the weapons of precision by a name which in Hebrew means God fights. Marcel Simon deduced from this that presumably the Circumcilians and very likely large masses of the rural population read and understood the Bible in its original language. All right, again, that is in North Africa. That's a nice source or nice quotation right there as well. It goes on to say, one assumption may be safely made. The similarity of the Hebrew and the Punic was bound to bring about right from the start a deep interpretation of Jews and Berbers in the Maghreb. St. Jerome, whose authority on the subject is undisputed and whose views were echoed by precisians, commented on the similarity of the two sister languages. Modern research has indeed confirmed the ancient traditions by showing that Hebrew and Punic share a common ancestry. These similarities explain the extraordinary extent of the spread of the Jewish beliefs in North Africa that prepared the ground for the acceptance of Christianity and eventually of Islam. So we're going to deal with the Jewish communities now. It goes on to say, it would be futile to try to fix a precise date for the establishment of the first Jewish communities or settlements in North Africa, but it is generally accepted that the first communities of any importance dates from about the time of the destruction of the time of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE. The second exile to Babylon was also accompanied by a westward migration. All right. And we know westward of Babylon, or specifically Jerusalem, would be into Egypt, would be into Carthage, would be into, the Maghreb, all right, into Africa specifically. Certain communities, among them the Berber, maintain an oral tradition that they were founded at the time or at that time, a view accepted by Marcel Simon, although he disputed Nahum Schlotz's conclusion that this was proof of a large-scale colonization. All right, so you even have a community in Djerba, which is in the Maghreb, that has a tradition that they were founded or they were came into Africa during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. The existence of Hebrew-speaking Jewish communities in North Africa substantiates the theory that they left Palestine before the original language, Hebrew, had been supplanted by Aramaic. The first Jewish settlers retained in their new environments the use of their own language, which their Punic neighbors understood. So even the Jews that were migrating to North Africa, their language was understood by their Punic neighbors, or rather the Phoenician neighbors, because the Phoenicians did speak Punic. It goes on to say, the similarities and background made it easy for them to adapt to their new homeland and find an atmosphere that was similar to the one that they had been forced to abandon. The Jews of the Maghreb maintained close ties with the Holy Land at all times. So the Jews of West Africa, the Jews of the Maghreb, because that's what Maghreb means, West, all right? They maintain ties or close ties with the Holy Land at all times. And even if you go deeper to the Maghreb, you know what I'm saying, you have traditions amongst your tribes, like your Igbos, of Jews coming in at different migrations and things like that. You even had, or you even have a tradition amongst the Igbos that you had Jews leave Nigeria and help Solomon build the temple and even migrate back to Nigeria after that. So this is an example of Jews in the Maghreb, or the Maghreb, having close ties to the Holy Land at all times. It says the Talmud relates the journeys of Rabbi Abika or Akba to the Maghreb, in which he doubtlessly helped to stir up the revolt against Rome. He says several rabbis were born in Carthage, and that's for, you know, the people that dislike the Talmud and things like that. If we was to get into the history of the Talmud, a lot of the early Talmudic writers were in Africa, were in Carthage, were in Caesarea, were in Egypt, things like that. So if you want to judge the Talmud, you need to reevaluate it and look at the history to a fuller effect. But it says Hillel, in a rather curious passage, explains the prevalence of flat feet among inhabitants of the Maghreb by a number of the swamps in the region. The knowledge and presumably the use of Hebrew among the Jews of North Africa continued till the beginning of the 5th century CE. We know a dispute between St. Jerome and St. Augustine on the correct translation of the Hebrew word kikanon or kikayon. I really don't know how to pronounce this name. I'm butchering it bad. But it says the biblical name of the shrub under which Jonathan slept. St. Augustine asked the Jews of Oea and to Tripoli to resolve the dispute. The early Christian writer Tertullian added further convincing evidence on the tendencies persisting of Hebrew in North Africa, a phenomenon which is hardly surprising in what was undoubtedly the most intensely Semitic of all countries of the diaspora. Indeed, Carthaginian domination so throughout permeated North Africa with the Semitic culture that it may be considered to have been a Semitic region in every respect many centuries before the Arab conquest made it so in name. The bonds between the Jews and the Punics, based on their long coexistence and similarity of language and culture, were further tightened in the face of the Roman invasion after the fall of Carthage. From this, a Judeo-Punic synchronism came into being, which, as will be shown in the following chapter, paved the way for Christianity and later Islam, both developments of the biblical revelation. All right, so I'm going to take a second, look at the chat before we get on to chapter 2. We will be ending after this chapter, and then we're going to go into another source and get some more information, and then hopefully we can get into the genetic data. So give me 1 second. All right, shalom to everybody that's interacting in the chat. Yes, indeed. The brother says, no doubt, while the world was blind, thinking all the events was in the Levant, they missed multiple waves of ancient Semites going through Yemen to Punt to Abyssinia or Libya, which DNA supports. And that's a great, great, great statement. The brothers, what I want to key in on is him specifically saying that they specifically miss multiple ways of ancient Semites going into, different localities. And again, we do see a DNA reflection of these ancient movements. All right. Okay. The brother that says hello about the book Canaan from Ghana. Please, please, please. I'm about to put my email in the chat right now. Email me, because I could have sent you that. I'm sorry for that, brother. Email me and I will send this once I'm done with the live. I will send that book to you once I'm done with the live. I do apologize, brother, for not responding to your email. Again, I do apologize. But let's continue to get into this. Chapter 2, Pax Romana. We might not read through all this because it's really just getting into the Jewish presence. Let's see. We're going to read some of this. Yeah, let's read it. Then we're going to go into the next source. So it says the Roman occupation that followed the fall of Carthage in 146 BCE put an end to the autonomy of the Berbers. At the same time, it brought the region from a position of relative isolation into one of an active participation in the new forces that had been created by the unity of the empire. As a result, the Jewish community in North Africa experienced a period of vital validity such as it has never known. The Pax Romana facilitated communications between the various Jewish group or Jewish communities around the Mediterranean basin and ensured the solid establishment of Judaism in 2 African provinces. The proconsular, which encompassed Caesarea or Libya, and Tunisia, which was Carthage, and the Caesarea, which included Algeria and Morocco. The uprisings, the relentless conflicts between the Jews of Palestine and its Roman invaders, which lasted more than a century, had profound repercussions in the 2 great African provinces, enriching their Jewish communities with the thousands who were forced to leave Palestine or who immigrated voluntarily. So again, it's always when dealing with North Africa, you always had Jews migrating forcefully or voluntarily. It has been estimated that 30,000 Jews were deported to Carthage by Titus, and Josephus recorded the presence of 500,000 Jews in Caesarea in the 1st century of the Christian era. North Africa was at that time the center of the extensive conversion to Judaism. The Palestinians who found their refuge in North Africa brought with them a smothering hate of the Roman oppressors, which erupted into a revolt at every opportunity. It may be assumed that many voyages through North Africa of leading Jewish personalities, especially those of Rabbi Akbia, arch foe of Roman paganism, were not unconnected with these events. According to Josephus, a group of zealots under the leadership of certain Jonathan fomented a powerful insurrection against the Romans in Caesarea. Shortly after the fall of Jerusalem, the indigenous African Jews frustrated this revolt. Following the denunciation of the insurgents by the most distinguished Jews of the city, Josephus or Jonathan was seized and executed along with most of his adherents. Josephus strongly censored Jonathan as described him as a visionary, an opinion which should be borne in mind when considering the atmosphere of the first uprising. The spirit of the first revolt continued to the smothering and the eruption again more fiercely. This time, nearly half of a century later, the Jews, animated by a national and religious abhor that was almost apocalyptic in its fever, rose up against the Greeks of Caesarea and for 3 years withstood all attempts of repression. All right, so what I'm going to do is move on to the next source because this really is just getting into the Jews of North Africa. I really wanted to focus more on the Phoenician connection in North Africa and show the specific DNA that reflects it. So I'm gonna see if there's anything else in here we can read before I move on to the next source. All right. Yeah, this is just dealing with the Jews. We can deal with this on another video. Yeah, okay. All right. And plus, we've already dealt with Jews in the Roman period a lot or before. So what we covered so far is the history of, the Phoenicians, or specifically the Punic language in North Africa, and also the Jews in North Africa, and how the Jews and the Punics were basically related, and how they, had a common relationship in language and also custom, and they both were Semites. And we also got into how, they were basically making these connections of the Punic speaking peoples to the Phoenicians and the Berbers. So we're going to get into that right now with this source right here: Identity and Peoples in History, Speculation of Ancient Mediterranean Mysteries. And what we're going to be reading from this specifically is the Berber connection to the Phoenicians. We're going to be dealing with the Berber connections to the Phoenicians. All right, let me get to it. And specifically, we're going to be dealing with Kabyle, the Berbers, or the Amazi. All right, and this is a location, I believe, in Algeria. Yeah, this is in Algeria. The Berbers of this location. So we're going to read, and we're going to get the connections between the Phoenicians and the Berber populations, specifically of these specific tribesmen. All right. Ooh, I'm looking at the chat right now. The brother Neriyahu just dropped a fire comment. We're gonna have to look into that. He says a recent genetic study has linked haplogroups EM81, EFGC18960, and EV65 to the diffusion of the Phoenician language in the Western Mediterranean. All right, according to Phoenix 2019, and of course, EM81 is a known Berber haplotype. All right, EM81 is a known Berber and even a Moorish haplotype. All right, so again, that's very, very, very interesting. And thank you for dropping. I'm gonna look into that later. So let's read. It says, let me zoom out a little bit. It says the migration of the Phoenicians to North Africa launched a fascinating panorama of intriguing connections and relationships among peoples. Of interest are Phoenicians and Jews, regardless of how we formulate their respective identities, but also the ancient Berber Kabyle populations in the area. It is conjectured that the native population may have been of Canaanite origin, or more generally, the Proto-Mediterranean/Middle Eastern stock. The Berber language is suggested belonging to the Semitic group, perhaps Hebrew-African, which is like Hebrew, or a Hebrew version of an African version of Hebrew. It says, but this is still subject to controversy. He goes on to say the Berbers spoke Punic. All right, we know the Phoenicians and also the Carthaginians spoke Punic as well, where it says that the Berbers spoke Punic as the Carthaginian and Phoenician tongue evolved on the Mediterranean coast seems more than likely. In Tripolitania, Western Libya, where Berbers lived, as in Jabal Nafusa, until today, Neo-Punic inscriptions were discovered, and Berbers were reported to have served in the Carthaginian army in the 4th century BC. In fact, ancient Libyans are sometimes referred to as Berbers or as Libyo-Phoenicians, a mixed population arising over the centuries. Proof of Phoenician deities in Libya, sometimes known by their mythological Greek names as Poseidon, the god of the sea, for Sidon, right? Because we know the Phoenicians came from this location, Sidon. And it says is but an etymological speculation for a word whose origin is unclear. The Lebanization of North Africa was a development in ancient history. Due to the primacy of the Phoenicians in both countries, it is suggested that the Hebrew place names Lebanon and Love, or Lebanon and Libya, both with a soft B, unlike their phonetic vocalization, and letters in Arabic and English could be etymologically connected. And I'm looking at the chat real quick. A brother just said Hannibal was Semitic, and indeed, I believe he was. I actually have some information on Hannibal that I could bring out a little later if I get to it. Hannibal was probably like a Berber or something like that. It says a captivating example of this use of the same word appearing as a name or part of a name in Lebanon and for place names in Nigeria is the word Baal, which seems like a short version of the Arabic Abu or Abu, father, or the Hebrew Abba. In Lebanon, until today, it designates an ancient non-Arabic toponym. In the Kabi language, surviving in Central Eastern Algeria and parts of Tunisia and Libya in particular, Baal serves as a tribal name exemplified in Greater Kabali for Ait, family Baal Adua, as a name in the example of Bu Zayin or Zayan, a mid-19th century hero of holy war against the French in the vicinity of Biscar in the area of Jebel Ares, and as a place name, as for the city of Borbu or Borj Boy Aridi. Man, these North African names and these Maghrebian names have some hard pronunciations. And I guess you can say that's because a lot of these locations were settled by Semitic peoples. It goes on to say, in as so much as the word Baal makes an evident sense in the Kabbalah language, this finding considerably supports the possibility that the word is an importation, or excuse me, is an import from elsewhere, perhaps from ancient Phoenicia or Lebanon. This single linguistic point indicates ancient Phoenician influence in Kabbalah or Kabila, of which even native Kabbalists of today have no explanation or knowledge. It says Phoenicians from the mountains and the coast of Lebanon settled on the Mediterranean Sea and in the North African mountain hinterland, where Berbers predominated not only in the Ares and Kabila in Nigeria, but also in parts of Libya. Two very distant connections between Phoenician and Berbers indicate the geographic extent of Berber settlement. So it could be that you had a connection between the Berbers, because you did have Berbers already in North Africa before the Phoenicians migrated. So what this was saying is it could show that there's a deeper, I guess you could say, geographical settlement and extent of the Berber people, because the connection that they had with the Phoenicians. So it's basically saying that they stretched from Lebanon into North Africa. It's where their settlements and their geographical extent locations could have been. In one instance, we learn of Hanno, the Phoenician maritime explorer in the 5th century BCE, meeting up with Berbers at Lixus, Morocco, on the West African coast, who hosted and interpreted for him his wide-flung travels. In another case, Phoenicians founded Qualma, just east of Constantine, named by its founders Malacca, which means salt, like Malaga in Spain, in eastern Nigeria, now called Gilama, near the Tunisian borders. This town is located in eastern Namibia, or Numidia, where there was an ancient Berber kingdom. A text found in Tunisia included both a Berber and Punic name as a bilingual Libyan Punic inscription, successive of overlapping layers of culture characterization, the Phoenician Berber eras. All right. Again, the Phoenician Berber eras. On early Egyptian hieroglyphic documents, the dating of which is estimated at close to 3,000 years BC, there is a sign identifying or signifying foreign land for the ancient Libyans. All right. So even the Egyptians named the even the ancient Egyptians named the ancient Libyans land foreign land. Why is this? Because these people in Libya were foreign peoples. He said, could this be due to the adventuresome Lebanese Phoenicians from whom Libya and its environs were indeed foreign terrain? In the wider picture, there was an ancient Phoenician colony just east of Libya in Egypt, where the Libyans had been portrayed as enemies and invaders. There are mentioned in the Bible during the 10th century BC period during a monarchy of Rehavam as soldiers in the Egyptian army invaded Israel. And you can find this in Chronicles chapter 2 and also 12. It says that foreign invaders of a country later became its loyal fighters is a conceivable possibility. Incidentally, Lake Huron, by that time, or by that same name, is located in both southern Lebanon and in the famous oasis west of the Nile, not far from the Libyan plateau. Is this merely a coincidence or hints to the intersecting mythical origins that began in Lebanon? And it's what I believe is showing is a migration of these peoples out of Lebanon, into Egypt and into Libya, and even into Carthage by way of these Berbers and even some Israelites, because again, you had Israelites follow the Phoenicians into North Africa. That's facts. It says the Berbers, known as the Free Amazi, developed good relations with the Phoenician Carthaginians and intermarried. A Berber prince fell in love with a princess from Hannibal's family, and Berbers went to Spain to fight with his forces against the Romans. So you have Berbers going into Spain in ancient times, and also during the medieval times, during the Moorish period, because the Berbers were actually the Moors, all right? Or the Moors were actually just Berbers. It goes on to say, with Rome's victory and the destruction of Carthage, the Berbers came under the Roman Empire in North Africa. Thereafter, Berbers adopted Christianity. Among this stalwart religious personalities was the Punic-speaking Saint Augustine, whom they claim as one of their own. Born in Sak Aras in northeastern Algeria, dying in AD 430. The Berber Jewish connection is no less intriguing. The Berbers Judaized, taking on a Jewish identity or recognition, a certain affinity with the Jews, and particularly to the avoid Islamization from the Arab conquest of the Maghreb beginning in the late 7th century is known. That there were Berber Jews who received their Judaism from the Jews of Syria is contended by a great medieval historian, Ibn Khaldun. Among the Berber Jews, one can identify the Jura or the Jarawa, a tribe inhabiting the Oris, and other Jewish tribes were the Nifoka Berbers in the Afrika, which is in Tunisian Libya area, and the Findulaos, the Bahulos, the Gitas. Yeah, these names are hard to pronounce. I'm sorry for butchering them, family. And the Fasad, Berbers of the distant Maghreb. So all these names that I just butchered would be Judaized or Jewish Berber tribes. It says, moreover, an important part of the Berber population adheres to Judaism even before the advent of Islam is a resilient contemporary thesis as well. Berbers avoided a full acceptance of Islam and actually apostatized 12 times, and perhaps even more frequently because the report by the Ibn Khaldun was in the early 14th century. Perhaps some of the Berbers often fighting the Muslims were actually motivated in the resistance by their profound Jewish identity. It should be cited as well that there had been a Berber Christian community in the Media, in the vicinity of Carthage and westward to Kabila prior to Islam. Islam's appearance and originated or organized around the Donatist sect divorced from the Church of Rome. It is reported that some of its followers could speak only Punic, and those would be Berbers. And they're specifically talking about Berbers. It goes on to say again, this suggests evidence of either Phoenician origin or Phoenician mixing with Berber stock. The African church dwindled after the Muslim conquest in North Africa, though in our times there is nascent trend of conversion to Christianity amongst Kabyle Berbers. All right, so again, this specific source we just read through lets us know that there is a connection between the Phoenicians and the Berbers, not only with language, but also culture, inscriptions, and even the localities, and even the history of people believing that the Berbers came out of, Sidon or Lebanon. And right now, what I'm about to do is just show a few quick pictures of these Kabyle Berbers. I really couldn't find any pictures of the males, but I'll show you the females. They're pretty much a mixed looking population as far as phenotypes, which we would expect specifically in North Africa, with those, invading peoples and things like that. Let me just share my tab all the way. Do it this way. All right. All right. So here is one picture of a Cabal Berber. She kind of looks Native American, if you ask me, which is funny. But again, this is those quote unquote Phoenician Berber tribes of Algeria. All right, here's another one. Sister from Kabylie, Algeria, those Berber tribes. And it's very interesting because I don't believe a lot of these Berber tribes even have, L1, L2, L3 mtDNAs, and they look like this. They look like, Negroid women, Afro women. Besides the other ones that were kind of mixed. She looks a kind of mixed Negroid phenotype. Cabal female, Cabal Berber female. So now that we got that, we stop sharing my screen and we're going to go over to this source right here. Let's see. 1 second. Pull the screen back up. All right, so now we're going to move on over to the genetic study, identifying genetic traces of historical expansions, Phoenician footprints in the Mediterranean. All right. So we're going to read specifically all the highlights that I have throughout this. Let's see. We're going to start up here. Just get a brief overview of the genetic study and what they did to find what they found. So the Phoenicians were a distinctive and independent civilization that dominated the Mediterranean Sea during the first millennium of BCE. Emerging from coastal sections of the Eastern Mediterranean, including the 4 main Bronze Age maritime cities of Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, and Arwad, and located in the modern countries of Lebanon and southern Syria. Their strategies included the establishment of settlement or settled colonies, foremost among which was Carthage in modern Tunisia, and many trading posts where they stayed for shortened periods. They went on to say that we set out to complement this historical information by searching the Phoenician genetic traces within modern populations. All right, so this is how they looking at the Phoenician traces by looking at modern populations. It goes on to say, we chose the non-recombining region of the Y chromosome for this purpose because its male specificity means that it would have been carried by the predominantly male Phoenician traders. Expansions from the Eastern Mediterranean could include the initial peopling of the modern humans during the Paleolithic era. The subsequent Neolithic transition originated from the Fertile Crescent, 8000 BCE. This is why I said that you probably had other Berbers or other people with E in North Africa and in Carthage and those locations before the Phoenicians, because you had Paleolithic migrations, you had Neolithic migrations into North Africa. For example, you have the Ibero-Maurusians, and they have some of the same haplotypes that you would see Phoenicians or Berbers with, and they were there way before the Berbers. So it says, and later events such as the Greek expansion or the Jewish diaspora. All of these, and possibly additional events recorded in history could result in a broadly similar genetic pattern with an origin in or near the Levant and decreasing gradient towards the west. Several previous studies have identified Y chromosome types showing gradient originating in the Near East and have sometimes linked them to Phoenicians. But further works is needed to distinguish between the general pattern and the specific Phoenician contribution. Thereafter, we have developed a strategy to identify a geographical genetic pattern associated with the specific historical expansion rather than the overall geographical gradient. The key to this was the use of historical documentation or documented locations of greater or lesser contact. In our case, Phoenician location matches approximately, skip this real quick, for distant or from the distant source. All right, so again, they're using historical sources to look at these locations and things like that. And right here is where we see major Phoenician colonies, Phoenician trading posts, and Greek colonies would be the blues. So again, we know that these major Phoenician colonies would be, of course, in Lebanon, Carthage, Spain, the islands off like Malacca, things like that, Majorca, and even Algiers. All right. And yes, brother, line from it would be interesting to see their ancient mtDNAs. But for example, we know if we look at, say, the Levant mtDNAs, they weren't L3. And even if we look in North Africa with the Ibero-Mauritans, I think they were like U. So it's possible they still were, people of color, but it's just real interesting, I find. But it goes on to say, in order to apply this strategy, we therefore needed, one, to choose suitable population sample sites for the investigation of Phoenicians and other expansions. Two, to generate or identify from available sources Y chromosomal data sets from the chosen sites. Three, develop our test methodology. And finally, four, consider the broader significance of any signals that emerged from the chosen population sites. When choosing populations, we considered the trade-driven colonization that would have mediated the genetic legacy of Phoenician expansions. All right, and with that, or what this is saying, they're considering the fact that because they did have different trade locations and colonizations of locations and expansions, it's possible that it could be a different genetic legacy that came amongst the Phoenicians, or a different Y chromosome, or different Y chromosomes that came amongst the Phoenician populations. It says minor colonization sites were established for the servicing of ships en route, as well as connecting with a guarding interest of foreign trade centers. This servicing was necessary for the expansion of trade throughout the Mediterranean basin with the maritime technology of the first millennium BCE, and established the regional variations that we seek to detect. So again, we're going to get ready and wrap it up and look at the data. It says the Phoenician influence regions selected were thus the coastal Lebanese Phoenician heartland and the broader area of the rest of the Levant. Then Cyprus and South Turkey, Crete, Malta, East Sicily, South Sardinia, Ibiza, southern Spain, and finally the coastal Tunisia and sites of the Tigris in Morocco. So again, they use Lebanon or Palestine. They use Cyprus, they use Turkey, they use Crete, they use Malta, they use Sicily, Sardinia, Spain, Carthage or Tunisia, and also Morocco. In addition, we sought to discriminate Phoenician candidate lineages from those spread by other colonization expansions, affecting many of the same islands and regions. So conclude the data from the Lebanon were available, and we collected 1,333 additional DNA samples from Syrian, Palestinian, Tunisian, Moroccan, Cypriot, Maltese males with at least 3 generations of indigenous ancestry. Each provided information of their geographical origin and gave informed consent for this study. Samples were typed with 11 STRs and with 58 Y-SNPs as described elsewhere. And we're going to look at that information in table S1. We augmented our collection with suitable published data on 5,899 males from 56 sites. So that's what we're about to review. We're about to review All the Y chromosomes they found from 5,899 males from 56 sites. And to do that, we're going to go to the supplementary material of the specific study, identifying genetic traces of historical expansion, Phoenician footprints in the Mediterranean. So we're going to look at haplogroups and haplotypes of new population sampled for this study. The first section we'll be looking at is populations from the Phoenician periphery. All right, and that's just the locations around Phoenicia. All right, so again, the populations we're looking at first is the populations from Phoenicia periphery, and we're going to be looking in Syria, or the populations that they got these samples from was in Syria. And of course, we see E. And the first thing we start to see that's very interesting is old E clades. We see the basal E. We see E1. We see another E1. We see E1B1A or E3A. And of course, we see the enormous E3B lineages amongst the Phoenician population. All right, we have plenty E3B1s, plenty E3B2s, E3B3. So if different E3B or if different E3B lineages, E1B1B lineages within these Syrian samples that they took to deal with the Phoenicians. And of course, we see other haplotypes that we know where they would come from, like G. We see I, we see J1. We know where J will come from. We know where I will come from, the Caucasus, and even Sardinia. So we know where these J1 samples will come from. We know where these J2 samples come from. And it's also interesting because some of these J2s or these J samples could actually be from the original Phoenicians, because the Phoenicians did come from Sidon, and we do have ancient, yes, you could say, samples from Sidon where we do find J, haplogroup J. So that's something I just wanted to throw out there to be fair. All right, so let me skip past these Syrian samples because we'll start to see, or we'll do nothing but see a lot of other haplotypes. We're looking mainly for those Afro-Asiatic haplogroups, which would be E, all right, in the Phoenician population. So we see another basal E, another basal E, and other E3B lineages in Syria. And I'm looking at the comment section real quick. The brother Nirayahu just said, according to Wikipedia, Phoenician genomes reflect the surrounding nations that were among them in the Levant. I theorize early Hamitic Canaanites would have carried haplogroup BT and AM13, but was absorbed. Yes. And I actually have a study on that. Let me see if I got it real quick. Since you brought that up, that shows that sample BT, and that shows BT in the Canaanite samples. So if I can find that real quick, I'm gonna show that to you real quick, bro, because that's a nice theory you have, and you actually have information to back it up. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yep. Here we go. Let me share my screen. Oh, you have it right here. Oh, you all can see that actually. So this is coming from Continuity and Admixture in the last 5 millennials of Levant or Levantine history from ancient Canaanite and present-day Lebanese genome sequences. So this is going into what the brother Nirayahu just brought out. And this is the supplementary data. This isn't the actual study. You can go read the actual study if you want to, but this is the supplementary data. And when we go to the supplementary data, what we see is samples from ancient Canaanite burials or Sidon. And this chart right here is very interesting as well, because it shows in the Tufian ancestry right here in the Levant, or proportions of each haplogroup. And it shows how during the PPNC, you had, haplogroup E basically replaced. And even in the Bronze Age, you had it replaced by haplogroup J. But let me show you those samples, bro. Near Yahoo. It's down here somewhere. Right here. Right, so table 4 counts of raw chromosome ancestral and derived allied genomes in Sidon BA males. We have A00, we have A0T, we have A0, we have A1A, we have A1B, we have BT, and we have B. So your theory is, spot on, and it's very probable that, the original Hamites either got killed, got absorbed, or even, got pushed into Africa. So I just wanted to show that real quick. But back to this. I'm going to move on down to the next population. Now we're dealing with Palestine, PAL, specifically it's Palestine. Of course, we see E3B in the Phoenician samples, E3B, plenty of E3Bs. Let's move down to another location. And now we're looking at populations from non-Phoenician Levant, or from non-Phoenician communities within the Levant. We see E, basal E, E3A, E3B, of course, E3B, 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 E3B. It should be expected to see, E lineages within the Phoenician, population, especially E3B. But what really surprised me is finding these old E samples like, the basal E and even E1. I wasn't surprised to find E1B1A or E1B1B. Of course, even more E3B samples. It's a lot of E3B samples in these Phoenician findings. The brother says, where do we find E3A in the Levant? I have to look into that, but this is dealing with specific Phoenician populations. Let's see, move on down. All right, again, we have populations from Phoenician colonies. We have E3B, E3B. Of course, this right here specifically is Cyprus. SYP population is Cyprus. And I believe in this, we have all E3B samples for the Phoenicians. And we have a basal E as well. Even more E3Bs. Again, we have plenty E markers in these Phoenician sites. We have basal E1B1B. Again, we have different E1B1B lineages in these Phoenician samples, specifically in Cyprus we're looking at now. All right, let's continue on and see what else we can find. Go to another population, of course. Now we're going to deal with Malta, which is MAL, Malta. Again, what's very surprising to me is we find a lot of basal E samples in these Phoenician findings. So that's very, very interesting. But again, we should expect E3B. We should expect small amounts of E3A. Again, I believe those E3As could be by way of Zebulun and Asher or other Israelite tribes. And it's also interesting because I believe Malta is like in Spain. And in there, you find a lot of R markers, which of course R is, I believe, the native haplogroup of Spain and Portugal or Western Europe. So you would expect to see, R lineages in, Western Spain or Phoenician Spanish colonies or territories. Now we're about to deal with Tunisia or Carthage. Well, of course, we see E3B lineages. All right, E3B lineages in Tunisia from these Phoenician samples. And of course, we read information from the genetic study to get an overview of what they did to find these samples before we even came to the supplementary material. All right. And now we're going to deal with Majorca. This is an island as well. I believe this is an island off the coast of Spain. And of course, we find another, or I believe this is actually an E sample that could be E3A or E3B. This is probably like E1B1. maybe. E3B samples, of course, in Majorca. E1B1A sample. Another E1B1A in Majorca. E3Bs, of course. Plenty of those. Another E sample that can be E3A or E3B. All right. More E3As, E3Bs in Majorca. Another E3A, a basal E in Majorca. Facts. I believe, or I agree with you. A no weary, haplogroup E is Semitic. I don't believe it is the progenitor of Semitic, but I do believe it is. It is Semitic. I believe DE is, Shem, and from that you will get your Semitic peoples. All right. More E3B samples, of course. That should be expected. I believe a lot of those surrounding tribes in the Levant would be different E3B lineages. All right. Another E3A, Majorca. So we found, even down here, more E lineages in Majorca. So I believe the majority of the haplogroups we find in this in this study is actually E lineages, whether it's E3B, whether it's basal E, E1, E3A. I believe it's actually majority E3 or E lineages, Afro-Asiatic lineages. So it's a lot of E samples in this. Let's see if there's another population we can go to, because we'll just keep running into these E samples in Majorca. Yes, brother, there is an E1A sample. I'm gonna show it to you once I get done with these down here, brother. There is a E1A. I think it's multiple E1A samples. So I'm gonna show you that once I get done with these. Again, we still in Majorca. Let me see if I can move on down out of Majorca. Again, there's plenty E samples, E basal, E, E3A, E3B in Majorca, all right, by way of the Phoenicians. Again, more E3As. Let's see if there's any more populations we can go to. So yeah, I would say the predominant haplotype of the Phoenicians would be E. Again, so yeah, we done right there. So again, we saw majority E samples in this. And again, these are the locations that got these from: 935 from Lebanon, 65 from Cyprus, 33 from South Turkey, 112 from North Turkey, so forth, so on. They got a total number of 5,899 samples. And I would say 40 to 50% of these, or I'll say 30 to 50% of these were E samples. Let's see. So I don't believe there's E1A samples, but there are E1 samples amongst the Phoenicians. I believe that actually is E1A. It will go into E1A or E1B. So this is you all's ancestors. For those brothers who are E1A, you know what I'm saying, this would be, you know what I'm saying, who you would come from, E1, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, it gives birth to E1A and E1B. And even the basal branch of E is, it's found that can lead to E1A as well. Let me make sure it's not E1A sample in here before I can get ready and wrap this up. So, yeah. So we brought out a lot of information today, family. Well, I'm not going to close this out. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So I'm finna try to catch up with the chat real quick. And I'm also, if you have any questions, please drop them real quick for me. If you have any questions, drop them. We showed the history of the Phoenicians and the Israelites going into North Africa, Carthage. Then we connected, Berber tribes to the Phoenicians. And we even showed the genetic reflection of the Phoenicians and how they would have been, or they would have had an Afro-Asiatic component amongst them by way of the various E samples we was able to find. All right. And even the brother near Yahoo put an amazing source in the chat that I will check out. You know what I'm saying? With him saying, or with the source saying that EM81, which is a Berber, the Berber haplotype, and even EV65 was responsible for expanding Phoenician language west. And again, we know that the Berbers do speak Punic, or they did speak Punic. I don't know if they still do now, but they did speak the Punic language, which is Phoenician. So again, shalom, shalom, family. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them. Thank you all for tuning in. If I have any more information to bring out dealing with the Phoenicians, Carthaginians, etc., I will bring it out while we on here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you were able to watch. The brother says, was prolific early Christian author from Carthage in the Roman province of Africa. Also, some sources describe him as a Berber. Interesting. The linguist René Biron suggests that he was of Punic origin, but acknowledged that it is difficult to decide since the heritage of Carthage has become common to Berbers. And that's because the Berbers are the ancient Carthaginians, the ancient quote-unquote Phoenicians. And again, this is that source the brother brought out that I will be looking into later on. Powerful. The brother says, so far what I've been studying, EV38 is the backbone of the Bantu expansion. Interesting. More than likely it is. But not a lot of people have basal EV38 in sub-Saharan Africa. Most of sub-Saharan Africa, Niger Congo people have, EM2 and different EM2 subclades. The brother says, a book I'm reading of Carthage and about one family royal group called the Barcids, who nearly destroyed Rome. Their surname means lightning in Hebrew, also Phoenician, and they built Solomon's temple. Yes, it's very probable, that you have Phoenicians or people from Phoenicia or Sidon building Solomon's temple, because again, where did the cedar from his temple come from? It came from Lebanon. We know the Phoenicians were in Lebanon. We know that he had relations with King Hiram. I think it was Hiram he had connections with during that time. So it's very possible you have Phoenicians building it with them, or rather pick people from Sidon or Lebanon. Facts, Hannibal was Semitic. The brother Live Farm says he found EM35/34 in Sidon as well, about 1,400 to 900 BCE. And that's very, very interesting and important because, towards the end or later on, about, I guess you can say 70-something years after 900 BCE, that's when you had a migration of those Phoenicians from Sidon into North Africa. Let's see. Says my book shows ancient Carthage sculptures, and they had Egyptian hieroglyphics. Yes, it's probable. Many of ancient Hebrews were traders. Yes. Brother says the Berbers were involved in the destruction of Carthage. Out of the destruction of Carthage, massive libraries and books were destroyed or distributed among Berber princes. Yes, I would agree with that. But I would say for this quote or from this comment that guess you can say Romans actually destroyed Carthage, not the Berbers. Says they closely resemble the Fula. Yes, it is. It has been stated that the Fulani actually are a branch or are a people that came from these Libyo-Phoenician Carthaginian peoples. And of course, I have brought that out before, I believe. I have to look for that source again if I want to bring it out, but it is possible. The brother says, and the contour in ancient Phoenicia and the Israelites have oral traditions of the Fulani people burning their crops with which caused them to migrate further into sub-Saharan Africa. Yes, that's because before the Khans got into modern day Ghana, they were in the kingdom of Ghana. And again, the Fulani are interesting people because again, you have different haplogroups amongst the Fulani. You have different tribes amongst the Fulani. So again, it's different. It's difficult when you're looking into the Fulani. You have to distinguish different tribes and things like that. The brother Lion Farm says, I agree. Important to watch the ancient Israelites, E1B1A women, pinpoint movements exactly. L3, L2, L1, which is introduced to E haplotypes actually later than M and N female mtDNA, which is interesting. Facts. So the brother Near Yahoo again says, AM13 are carried by Palestinians today. Interesting. But those Hamitic Canaanites were overwhelmed very early before the biblical narrative. Thank you. And that's what I've been trying to get people to understand. You know what I'm saying? And it could possibly be, of course, mention of the curse mentioned in the book of Jubilees. And he brought up a very great point because I've been trying to get people to understand. It's hard, trying to talk to brothers and sisters on Instagram and stuff like that a lot of times because they legit think that these people in the Levant all the time were, in every reference were just straight up Hamitic people. And that's not the case. A lot of these people in the Levant, when it came to the Exodus and Joshua's conquest, they were not predominantly Hamites. The people in Canaan were, those people that invaded from the Caucasus, right? Remember the Japhetic invasion videos to Levant we covered? So you had Japhetic peoples in the Levant doing the conquest of Canaan. And even the Telemana letters lets us know that as well. And you also had other Semitic tribes in the Levant. I'm not saying you had zero Canaanite or authentic descendants of Ham in the Levant, but I just know that you have to look at the history surrounding the Levant, specifically before the Israelites got there, because it was a huge, genetic drift. The brother says, I'm guessing E1B1B is the Semitic marker. No, it isn't the specific or only Semitic marker. It is the major Semitic marker. It was one of the prime candidates for dispersing Afro-Asiatic languages into the Near East and things like that. But again, you did have E1B1A and E1B1EB going to the Near East, speaking Afro-Asiatic languages. You do have the father of E1B1A and E1B1B by way of EP2 being the, I guess you can say, the proto-Afro-Asiatic speakers. So although E1B1B is the main, I guess you can say the main distribution or main speaker of of Afro-Asiatic language today, and even Semitic languages today, they are not the only Semites. And even today, in Arab populations, in Berber populations, in Lebanese, Palestinian, Yemeni, Ethiopian, what else? Even Iraqi, you have E1B1A, and those people wouldn't speak Bantu, they wouldn't speak Niger Congo, they would speak Afro-Asiatic languages. Thank you, brother. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. The brother says, could the Fulani or the Fulani and even the Hausa descend from Berbers? It's probable. And you have to look at their DNA. And even their oral traditions and things like that. The brother says, what about Burkhardt Fassal people? Who was they? A lot of the Burkhardt Fassal people, let me just Google that so I don't even, let me see what tribes in that location so I can tell you what I know about those tribes specifically. And again, if anybody has any more questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. know that there are Mandi tribes in Burkina Faso, I believe. Let me see what tribes are in there specifically. That's in the Niger Mali area. So that whole that whole little area will be like, I guess you can say, a mixture of your Songhai people, your Mandi people, your Fulani people, your Hausa, uh, those type of peoples. So some of those peoples are Israelites, even though they practice Islam today. Some of those peoples descend from those invading Arab nations that came in, and some of them even descend from Berbers that came down as well from the north because of the Arabs. So it's different populations, and some of them are even natives. So it just depends on what specific tribe you're referring to in Burkina Faso, my brother. So I'm gonna see if I can bring one last few things out concerning this topic, and we'll wrap it up. See if I got it. Man, I really hope you all enjoyed this video today, man. Brought out a lot of information. A lot of information. I may do a video on the Moors, get the history around that, and then of course get a genetic history. Because again, in this video, I said the Berbers were nothing but Moors. So I would like to, prove that, it's kind of like um, the Phoenicians ended up involving into the Moors because again, you did have Phoenicians in Spain at earlier times, and then later when they invaded in the 7th century. So I have one last thing to share, and if there's no more questions after I read this, we're gonna wrap it up. So 1 second while I pull this up. All right, no problem, brother. No problem, brother. But for instance, I do have information out. I just have information out on the Mandi people that would be in Burkina Faso. So if you want to look at my video I did on those people, then that can give you a little information on those people as well. You also have a group of people amongst the Fulani, known as the Palouse or the Piyus, and also the Gauls, and they are known to be Jews as well. So, and they are in Burkina Faso. And even a brother right here near Yahoo says, my ancestors are Birkenab or Birkenab. I'm sorry for butchering that word, my brother. But he says they are a mixture of Hamites and Shemites, but mostly Shemites. So again, yes. It just depends on the tribe. It just depends on the tribe. So let me share my screen and I'm going to read this. So again, family, if you have any follow-up questions, any last questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And we're going to get into those questions you all have after I share my screen. This last source. So I found this very interesting. It's not really that much, but I found it very interesting. It's the New York Times, or from the New York Times, published 1991, July 20th, Saturday. What should we start from? We're going to start from, we're just going to start from the very first highlight, and this is dealing with Carthage. And it says, for 30 years, American blacks have claimed Hannibal as their own. All right. And if that's true, that means we was claiming that since about the 1960s. And where would we get that information from? Our American black ancestors. That's very interesting. But again, for 30 years, American blacks have claimed Hannibal as their own. When this was done in an ancient history classroom at the University of Pennsylvania, Professor Williams C. McDermott responded, yes, Hannibal was as black as King David. All right, and again, I would more than likely prescribe Hannibal to be of Berber stock. Berber stock. It says the great Carthaginian was born in the city founded by Phoenicians from Tyre, led by Dido, Elisa, sister of King Ptolemy and great niece of Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab of Israel. In short, the Carthaginians were West Phoenicians, that is Northwest Semitic, probably Canaanites. So again, when y'all hear people being called Canaanites, you don't always have to think sons of Ham. Because again, they literally just said that these people are probably Semites. I mean, Northwest Semites, probably Canaanites. Canaanite is nothing but a designation. Just like if somebody was to say, I am American. All right, there's multiple cultures, multiple nationalities, multiple haplotypes in America. All right, not everyone in America are the same. It says, in short, the Carthaginians were Phoenicians, that is, Northwest Semites, probably Canaanites, and the same stock and almost the same language as the Hebrews. All right, again, what I want to point out is right here it says, yes, Hannibal was as black as King David. Again, not a major source, but fairly interesting. Not a major source, but fairly interesting. So again, comment section says, is it possible that the Bedouins are direct descendants of Phoenicians? Nope, I would say Phoenicians or Bedouins are direct descendants of Ishmaelites and or other tribes. And I'll bring a source up real quick just to show why I say that they are direct descendants of Ishmaelites, so at least some of them. And even the brother, I forgot his name on YouTube. I showed this video before, but it's a brother that's, dang, I wish I remembered his YouTube channel. And I could actually show the video, but he's actually in the desert with sheiks of Bedouin tribes. They're black as day, and they're telling him that he descends or that they descend from Ishmael. It's actually the brother that did the video about the Jews in Morocco and also about Israel being in Northeast Africa and also about the Kikongo language being a branch of ancient Hebrew. All right, Stephen Graham. That's his name on YouTube. That's his YouTube channel, Stephen Graham. That's his name. And he actually, interviewed some Bedouin sheiks of the desert. And they said that they was descendants of Ishmael. But I'm going to bring out a quick source that says the same thing just for your validity or for validity and for you to have it as a reference. Find this source real quick. Then I'm going to answer the rest of the questions in the chat. Oh, man, where is it? One second, family. Trying to find it. All right. Let's see if it's coming up somewhere here. Yep, here we go. So let me copy and paste this and open it up. Share my screen. All right, so right here is a source that you can go to that shows or states that it's possible that the Bedouins are descendants of Ishmael. Because again, what we have to realize is a lot of these patriarchs of the Bible were nothing but Bedouins themselves. Like Abraham, he was a Bedouin. And Ishmael, he was a Bedouin. Things like that. Bedouins are nothing but desert dwellers. All right. Let's see. Where should we start from? I'm gonna just read where it literally says, what should we read from? Let's just read from right here where it says a large part of Arabia, more especially Arabia Petra, has been their home. On these barren sands, they have multiplied into millions, and from these some 1,200 years since they issued forth in hordes, fierce, terrible, sweeping with their armies half the then known world. The hosts of Asia and Africa and of Europe have quailed before them. The 12 tribes of Jacob have been scattered among the nations of the earth, and no narrow spot of the globe now owns their rule. But the 12 tribes of Ishmael, unchanged in character or habits, are still in the lands of their progenitor. The attempts of the most powerful monarchies and their efforts of generals accustomed elsewhere only to the victory to bring them to the subjections have been abortive. The Bedouins, descendants of Ishmael, still roam in all their wildernesses. And it's very important to point out the fact that Bedouins have both E1B1A predominantly, and they also have E1B1B. You know, bringing more validity to the fact. I believe Abraham would have passed down EP2 to his sons like Ishmael, Jacob, Esau, things like that. The brother says, do you believe the Dongon tribe have connections to Egypt and North Africa, possibly a Levant peoples? Yes, 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 I do. I do indeed. I believe any people with haplogroup E, have connections to the North, specifically the Northeast and even the Levant, even Arabia. At some point in time, they would have migrated from those localities into, West Africa, specifically dealing with the Dogon tribe. And even they have old E1 clades. So, it's very, very interesting who they can be descended from. I don't know who, but, it's a lot of funny things going around in the Israelite community. People trying to say that these people are descendants of Ishmael and different things like that, but I don't see it, especially not genetically. But the brother said the Bissa tribe, but the brother Neriyahu, he is of the Bissa. He has plenty of information on them. Specifically, they are of the tribe of Dan. He says, yes, I'm Bissa. We are formerly Busadan. We have links to the tribe of Dan and the house of Judah, descendants of the Saniki from Aswan, Sonim, Soniv, which is in Egypt, of the Elephantine Israelites. All right. So, yes, that's facts. That's facts. What he just said is facts. Bissa or Bissa, indeed. Yes. I'm well aware of the brother Hebrew of Israel. We have talked in the past. That is a fellow brother of mine, man. I love his channel. Yes. Make sure you check out that, because again, the Bissa are Mandi. So when I'm talking about the Mandi people, I'm talking about the Soniki, the Bissa, the Bussa, the Mandinka, all the Mandi groups. You know what I'm saying? So again, I'm gonna give you all about a minute or so to see if there's any more questions, comments, or anything. If not, I'm gonna wrap it up, and I greatly appreciate you all for tuning in with me on this Sunday, and I hope you all enjoyed the information. All right, so again, I'm gonna give you about 1-2 more minutes. Anyone has any final questions, comments, or anything, please go ahead. If not, willing, I'll be back on sometime next week. If not Saturday, Sunday. All right. So again, after watching this, you should have a understanding, at least a small understanding of Phoenician migrations into North Africa, and even, Israelite migrations into those locations as well, and how you have a Afro-Asiatic reflection amongst their genome by way of, the basal E branches, the E1, the E3B, and even the E3A. All right. So with that, family, I say Todah for watching. Thanks and shalom. All right. Thanks and shalom to everyone that tuned in. Shalom alaikum. And I will see you all next Shabbat. So I'm gonna stop this to answer your questions real quick. I see two good questions that came up, and I wanted to answer them. So I don't even think I've looked into E2B1. So let me go to isgg.org and even see if that's a haplogroup that I can recognize real quick. Then I'm gonna answer the brother Nirayahu question. So the brother says E2. Wow. Yeah, so when it comes to those lineages like E2, I have no idea about those specific clans. And that's something I should actually look into. That's something I should actually look into. I would say those haplotypes would, be, older proto-Semitic populations or things like that. But it's also possible that they could have been amongst, other Semitic populations like Moabites, things like that, Israelites, and things like that. Because again, we do see old E clades in the Phoenician population, like E1 and even Basel E. So again, this haplotype E2B1A, that would be, or E2B1, that specifically would be from E2. Yeah, that would be from E2. Well, it would come from E2B, then it will go back to E2, then that will go all the way back to E. All right. So that's where you get from E, you'll get E1, and then you'll get E2. And from the E1 lineages where you get E1B1A and E1B1B, those particular lineages. Again, the brother says, so is it possible that the E haplotypes among the Phoenicians could be those Israelites that were among the Carthaginians during the maritime explorations? Facts. I do believe so. Especially those E3 A lineages. Now, when it comes to those E3B lineages, that's where we have to start to look and search, search that out, because again, we know that certain groups are connected to certain E3B lineages. We know the sons of Joktan are connected to certain E3B lineages. We know, or let me not say the sons of Joktan for those that don't know. Let me just say modern day Ethiopians and southern Yemenis are connected to certain E3B tribes. Certain Berbers are connected to certain E3B tribes. The Bedouins are connected to certain E3B lineages. And even like if we go back to the Natufians, they had certain E3B lineages that connected them. So again, I do believe those E3A lineages would indeed be Israelites. But when it comes to those E3B lineages, we have to distinguish them from the other Semitic populations that would have been amongst them, if that makes sense. The brother says, what's your thoughts on Seti the first, father of Ramses II? They say that the Exodus family, and I found them to be J1 by a find of Tel Shudad with Seti the first ring. They say this the Exodus family. I don't believe the Ramses family has anything to do with the Exodus. I believe the Exodus happened in around the 15th century, between 1450 BC and the 1500 BC, actually, if I'm being honest. And I base that on a plethora of things. I base that off of First Kings 6, where King Solomon states that, they were, I believe he either said 480 or 380, 480 or 380 years after they had left Egypt, And we know that Solomon's temple or founding was around 950. We add that up to that time, that'll take us way past the times of, Ramses. So it is possible that they were J1, but I don't think that would have to do with the Exodus Egypt family or even, the Israelite period. I think the Israelites would have been gone during that time. So maybe in the near future, I will do a video on why I believe the Exodus took place at that time, bringing out, because it's a lot of information we can get into. It's a lot. I don't want to say too much, but it's a lot. It's a lot. The brother says, I agree, many Bedouins are Ishmaelites. Yes, yes, yes. Again, Bedouins have different tribes and clans as well. So some might be Ishmaelites, some may not be. So we have to keep that into account again. So, but I do believe many are, or a lot are. The brother says E2B is the female L2B1 and the male EM54, but I have no idea who they are. Huh? Maybe I'm reading that wrong. E2B is the female L2B1 and the male EM34. 54, but I have no idea who they are. Yeah, I don't. Maybe rephrase that. I don't want to misquote you, brother. I don't. Just requote, retype that if you can. Facts. The brother says Ramses II also isn't related to Ramses III. So all you brothers out there who think Ramses II is related to Ramses III, stop thinking that. Also, the Egyptian times was proven wrong, and the Bible years are interpreted sometimes more complex than it seems. Yes. And even if Ramses II, even if Seti, and even let's go back to this comment. Even if Seti the first and Ramses II were J1, etc., we know that these people set out military campaigns into the Levant. Seti the first and Ramses II. They actually boasted and bragged about, land waste Israel. So how in the world did the Exodus happen during that time period? You know what I'm saying? If they have stelas commemorating them destroying or laying waste Israel, they also laid waste to Edom. They also laid waste to Moab. This is according to their stela. Said my mother is L2B1, very rare MT. All right. So again, family, if I see another comment pop up during the outro, I'll answer the question when the outro go over. But again, shalom, man. I thank you all for participating, tuning in, and interacting with me today, man. Much love, and I'll see you all next Shabbat. So again, one last thing before we wrap up, the brother said it is the male haplotype EM54, the subgroup of EM96, the female haplotype in L2, but I'm not sure if they are Israelites. Is this your specific haplotype or someone else? And again, it just depends on those people's history, who they are really, their tribe, things like that. It depends on a lot. Can't really just tell off haplogroups a lot. Have to go deeper into it, or traditions, customs, things like that. It's ways, to distinguish these different lineages and things like that. The brother says Ramses the third father was from Assyria. And again, that's very, very, I guess you should say intriguing, because I did see something or a source, calling his father, I forgot his name. I think it's like Sek. I don't even want to butcher it, but it's Sek something. And it said his father was a Assyrian. And Ramses the third is EV38. And that's very, very important, because the brother, speaking of Hebrew of Israel, the brother just brought out a few videos, and he brought out a major, major source dealing with the elite dominance haplotype. And the elite dominance haplotype would have been EP2 or E1B1. And the source was basically saying that the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Akkadians, all those ancient Semitic peoples, they would have been of E1B1 haplotype. So again, that means they would have had E1B1A or E1B1B. So again, if that's source about, Ramses' father, Ramses the third father being an Assyrian is true, it makes sense to why he would have V38, if that makes sense. Okay. So yes, that's another thing. A lot of Bantus have E3B as well. A lot of Bantus have E3B as well. And I actually have to look into that. I would like to know if those E3Bs have been was a part of the Bantu expansion, or is that from like the Arabs coming in from the east, or is that from the Semitic peoples that was already in East Africa with E3B, who they could have intermingled with during their migration to South Africa. So a lot of African American, or a few African Americans, have E3B, but a lot of Bantu tribes do have E1B1B. For example, you can find Bantu tribes with sometimes 20, 15, even 30% E1B1B, and the rest will be E1B1A, and even sometimes they'll have haplogroups A and B, you know what I'm saying, which would be expected with them, coming in, mixing, taking over sub-Saharan Africa. So that's very, very interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that and see if that E3B lineage was a part of that Bantu expansion, or was it due to the Arab conquest, or them mingling or mixing with those Semitic tribes that was in East Africa prior to their migration. Because again, you had Jokhtanites cross the Red Sea into Ethiopia, found the kingdom of Habasha way before the Bantu migration, and they would have had E3B. So that's interesting. Thank you for bringing it up. The brother believes it's more than likely from the Arab conquest. It's probable. Have to look into it. And again, he says it's in their oral tradition. Interesting. So again, family, this is the last time, man. I ain't even gonna play the outro this time. I'm gonna just wrap it up, man. I thank you all again. I thank you all again and again. I will see you all next Shabbat. I will see you all next Shabbat. Oh man, y'all keep coming with. He says E3B was part of the Bantu expansion as well as E2B. Interesting. Yep, because some Bantus do have E2B as well. I saw that. I do know that. Okay. We have a lot to look into. We have a lot to look into. Thank you again for that. And shalom, family. Shalom alaikum. And again, brother, did you email? Matter of fact, did you email me at my email while we on here? Before I get off, did you email me? At the email I dropped in the chat. Let me see if I got an email from you. Right. So check your email now, brother. Check your email now. It should be in there in less than 30 seconds. And I hope you enjoy the read. Anyone else, if you have any questions, comments, you can email me, of course. Any sources you need, any books, I got you. And with that, All right. So check your email. I just sent that, brother. And with that, I'll wrap it up. And again, you all enjoy you all's day.